were a prisoner in what you consider right, crowded with the lost souls of tomorrow's light, waltz to the cryptic tune of the endless night. The earth's burden too dark to unscramble, maggots eating away the soul of uncertainty. Take your past and dance, young child. It will be all you have to gamble. The moon flickered through a flap of a small town seen between two great mountains. This little town only saw a little portion of the moon on nights as dark as these. The rain gave a soft rhythmic patter on the ground. The village of Hangleton was a peaceful little town filled with people doing their normal daily routines. Everybody was usually nice to everybody except one boy. This boy was named Oddson Balton. He liked to live in peace and rarely went out in public, except on an occasional stroll down to the town's market to buy supplies. But the reason he didn't go out is because the inhabitants in the village seemed to think that he was very strange and mysterious, because he looked a little out of place and didn't have any input in the town's meetings. He was a tall boy with long hair and bright protuberant blue eyes. He was fairly skinny with knobbly knees and brittle arms. His lack of strength made him incapable of doing town work like hauling wood, chopping down trees, or helping build tracks for the train. He saw these things ignorant and pointless. He just liked painting, writing poetry, and playing music. That's what made him especially abnormal, because all the villagers didn't seem to have any interest in anything artistic. They just spent all their time and energy on the train tracks that would soon cut through the mountains in the village. When he walked through the forest for his daily stroll, the hunters would gossip about him and make silly assumptions that he was mad, and wouldn't treat him as well as the other law-abiding citizens in the village. He didn't think he was anything of the sort. He just didn't like being in public or having conversations about things he really didn't care about. Although he was very friendly, he didn't appreciate being looked down on, so he wouldn't say much to any of the villagers. He always thought the people shouldn't be judged on how they treat their superiors and equals, but how they treat their subordinates. That's how you really know a person, he often would say to himself. In that case, I probably know more about these people than they do. He often liked to talk to himself, not like the crazy loonies living in the mountains while they're in public for the first time in years, but he just wanted to talk aloud since there was nobody to talk to. He was 15, but very mature for his age because of his seclusion and solitary existence. He did have parents, but they only came home on special occasions because his parents worked in the town of Machine and was rarely given any free time to travel. The town of Machine was miles up north. It was completely corrupted by the business of Dixon Barrel, the travel development agency. They made trains and forced small towns to build train tracks to course through nature's path. He would often tell his parents to quit these horrid jobs and live off the land like he did, but they said they wanted the nicer things in life. But after long hours thinking in his cabin, he came to the conclusion that they just wanted to be away from him and live life in ways that he didn't understand. The town below the factory was often called the Devil's Lower Lounge because it was filled with nasty gun carriers, drunks, and whores. He preferred to be by himself anyways. He was perfectly fine with it. He would occasionally feel the aching pain of loneliness, but quickly told himself that he was better off alone. People in Hangleton just didn't understand art or abnormal ways of thinking. They mostly lived in their repetitious lives of contentment. Oddson had no problem with that, but he had a gift of seeing things people couldn't. He would often see people walking about that looked perfectly happy, but he knew deep inside they were aching for something sacred or some kind of meaning to their lives. He awoke at sunrise, still laying in bed, listening to the birds chirping and the rain that was falling from the night. He was trying to remember the dream he just had. It was a good one. He was laying in a shallow pond with trees and streams surrounding him, when a wise-looking old man appeared from the cave nearby. The man kept beckoning towards him, so he obliged, and stood in front of him. His stare was piercing, if he could see the very soul of Oddson. He said in a whisper, seeming to come through in waves, "Come with me yet, my young child. You've been calling me for many moons and suns, and now here I stand before you." They looked at each other for a long time. Then, after what seemed like hours, the old man lifted his miraculous staff and plunged it into the ground. As soon as the staff hit the earth, he woke up with a jolt. Oddson was trying to fathom what that dream meant and asked himself sleepily, who was that auspicious man, and what did he mean when he said, "I've been calling him"? He dwelled on this thought for a time, but the more he thought about it, the more it drained away from his mind. It was like trying to cup water in your hand. The harder you try, the more water falls beneath your fingers. So he shrugged and lit a fire to put his teapot on. As he was lighting the fire, he brutally remembered there was a town meeting in a few hours. He hated the town meetings and would happily skip the monthly torture. But everybody had to go to the meetings, or else the law enforcer of the village would give you a very hard time. If you didn't abide, the punishment that followed was just like all the other consequences for breaking laws. Going to the town of Machine and talking to the head honcho for work. Oddson shuddered at the very thought of it. So he would gladly attend those boring meetings, then go all the way up north and work for that scum in the dreadful factory. The meetings were stupid. All they talked about was the stupid train tracks they had to build and encouraging them to keep working on them. Sometimes folk from Machine would come to town to check up on them to make sure that they were making progress on the tracks. They were usually an unfriendly lot, so all the meetings prior to that incursion were about how to treat their person from Machine with the utmost respect, and to make the town look all neat and ordered. Oddson wasn't exactly rude to the people inspecting the town, but he definitely didn't show as much respect as the other villagers. He thought the inspectors looked like idiot buzzards swooping over their prey. But he got dressed, drank his tea, and went outside to look at the sky. It was a murky mixture of orange and dark purple. He was admiring the scenery when he saw some of the villagers sleepily going out to check their mail. He hastily went inside, not trying to be caught in a dull conversation about the weather or anything of that nature. He sulked on his bed, savagely thinking about the stupid meeting he would shortly have to witness. The meetings weren't all that bad, it was just the people that attended them. He would often hear them gossiping about him behind his back and laughing at him because of the clothes he wore. He liked to make his own clothes, and made him feel more comfortable than the clothes the villagers would wear. They all looked cryptically alike in their blue tunics and red pants, and the women usually wore dirty white gowns. Oddson wore a multicolored poncho with a soft woolen shirt, gray pants, homemade moccasins, and a woolen hat to keep his hair out of his eyes. He liked his appearance because he was very comfortable in it. People often laughed at him, but he didn't care. It beat wearing a sweaty, tight tunic or dress all day long. To ease his mind, he took out his dream journal to write down the dream about the old man. As he was writing down every detail that came to mind, he all of a sudden remembered something the man said. "Today will be the day that your road of contentment will play host to the company of another intersecting pathway. How you handle it is your decision to make." Oddson frantically jotted this down next to the solid description of the dream. "Why didn't I remember this until now?" he said. "And what does he mean by intersecting pathway? Maybe he meant the town meeting, who knows?" His mind dwelled on that until it was shattered by the town's bell that pierced his eardrums and thoughts. Every time the town meetings were soon to start, a villager would ring a huge stupid bell in the middle of the town to wake everybody up and remind them that there was a meeting to attend. He put his dream journal on the side table and went out in the bright sun to go to the town square. He passed shops and houses until he got to the middle of the town. The villagers were looking a bit too chipper this early in the morning, in his opinion. He rubbed sand from his eyes and took a seat near the back of the crowd. People behind him were talking about how mingy his clothes were and how he could possibly look so tired and bored when there was a town meeting about to start. Oddson was far too used to this to care. His head sat jolt upright when a jittery-looking man stood up at the podium, banging his mallet for silence. The man gave a little cough and talked so loudly the people on the other side of the mountain could probably hear him. As we all know, the inspectors will be coming in a few days' time to see if we've been working hard and staying on top of things, which we clearly are, he said proudly. Keep up the good work, lads, and Oddson's attention trailed away from the speech. He was thinking about what the old man said in his dream. Your road of contentment will play host to the company of a new intersecting pathway. He couldn't quite figure out what this meant. The speech droned on, and he started to get sleepy when he came slightly back into focus, and the man said, "So everybody, let's show them that we're working hard and displaying our noble work. Good job, everybody. Let's start work early today just to ensure our loyalty to the great men of machine." Hudson gave a little chuckle to himself and ignored all the muttering about him that started to resume before the speech began. So he started to head back to his cabin. He almost opened the door when he saw his mailbox was open. This gave his heart a strange jolt. He never got mail, not even from his parents. He didn't have any friends, so he was very curious who it was from. His hands trembled a bit as he reached for the letter. It had no return address. It didn't even have Oddson's name on it. So it must have been put there by a mysterious sender, not the postman. His chest was pounding uncomfortably when he opened it. The paper looked homemade, not the paper made from the men in machine. But he was surprised to see how short it was. It bore only one sentence written in loopy writing. "Meet me in the forest, my young child." He stared at these words for a long time, thinking, who wrote this letter, and why would they want to meet him in the forest of all places? The only people that went in there were hunters and the occasional fishermen here and there. He had a feeling he should leave right now to see if his unknown letter writer was waiting for him, but he suppressed this impulsive action and hurried inside to lock the door. He almost had a twinge of fear. "How do I know if this person's intentions are good?" he said in a low whisper. "Now I know what that old man meant." He was definitely right about an intersecting pathway. This was very out of the ordinary. He had never received a letter before. But if he did, he thought it would be more descriptive, and at least be aware of who sent it. "Maybe it was given to me by mistake," he said. "I mean, there isn't a name on it, so it could have been placed in the wrong mailbox." He sat down, trying to slow his thoughts about the unknown sender. Curiosity kept nagging at his brain like a leech, so he grabbed his fishing pole and headed out towards the forest. If this mysterious man wasn't there, he'd just go down by the stream and try to catch some fish for supper. As he entered, he passed the huge pine trees guarding the inhabitants of the forest from the noisy workers of Hengleton. He had the strange sensation that he was being watched, but he always had that feeling when he entered the forest. As he walked along a slim pathway, the ground was covered in dead maroon pine needles. The trunks were the same shade of maroon that bled on the pine needles. He entered the part of the forest that blocked out most of the sun's light. Only defined rays could be seen shining through the gaps of the trees. He could hear the river trailing along the roots of the vast mountain. As he reached the lake's edge, he dug up some worms from a nearby rock and baited his hook. He casted it in the lake and thought aloud, "I don't see anybody waiting for me here. Maybe they already left." His thoughts were shattered by a tugging of his pole. Fish in the river were usually small bluegills or perch, but this wasn't a bluegill or a perch. He could tell by the way it fought. It was a big one. After a time of strong tugging, Oddson was caught off guard. The fish suddenly stopped fighting, so in his surprise and mid-tug, he fell on his back. The fish rose up about right above the river, and he was astonished to see that it wasn't fish at all. It was an odd-shaped bird, with crystal blue feathers with huge gaping wings. It had clear reddish eyes, and his claw bore a hook from his rod. It hadn't been caught at all. If anything, the bird caught Oddson's hook with his large talons. The bird bore it in his claws and let go. Oddson was flabbergasted. He had never seen a bird swimming like a fish. He thought he would at least see it dive into the water, but he was there a long time before he even baited his hook. That means the fish was breathing underwater. He was just curiously admiring the bird's immaculate coat of feathers that were soft blue when a soft voice behind him made him spin around. A very old man stood before him, wearing a bright blue cloak, almost the exact color of the bird's feathers. He had long white hair and a beard that was fluttering in the wind. He was carrying an extravagant staff with strange colored stones carved into it. Animals can do quite miraculous things when they are trying to grab your attention, he said softly, looking down at Oddson with a mysterious stare, showing his powerful blue eyes. I suppose so, Oddson said quietly. Who are you? Well, I'm just a humble traveler that stumbled across your path, nothing less, he said, thoughtfully. Oddson was strangely remembered of the old man in his dream, but his dream, the old man didn't carry a bird, and he was much younger. Could this be the same man? I see my presence has given you a fright. Would you prefer me to leave? The man said. Oh no, you didn't give me a fright. You just reminded me of someone, Oddson said. After he said this, he swore the man gave a little flicker of his eye, almost a wink. Well, we all look alike in one way or another, the man said. What name were you given at birth, my young child? Oddson Balton, he said. Very interesting name, the man said thoughtfully. And what is yours, sir? Oddson said. Well, that is a question that is very difficult to answer, the man said, giving Oddson a kind but piercing stare. My existence did not result from human silly desires, he said. The words the man spoke hit Oddson in a strange place. This wasn't your ordinary man. His words didn't seem to make sense, but he spoke them with such gentle power. He was curious to hear more. So where do you come from, sir? Oddson said shakily. I come from way up north, the man said in reverence. Do you live by the town of Machine? He said. Good heavens, no, said the old man, waving his hand. My place of foundation is much farther up north than there, he said, giving Oddson a curious wink. Well, I come from the village of Hangleton, just up ahead, Oddson said, pointing to the direction of his village. I see they're doing very noble work for the men in Machine. If they work any harder, instead of the tracks being binded upon the earth, it will be binded across their heads, the man said, giving a jolly little chuckle. Oddson was glad to meet someone that shared his cynicism and skepticism of the foolish men in the village. He gave a little laugh and replied, I'm not very fond of the town either, but I don't have anywhere else to go. I always wanted to travel, but I never left the village before. That's most unfortunate, the man said gravely. Do you have family reigning over you? Yes, but my parents work in the town of Machine and are too busy to see me, Oddson said. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, my dear boy. But on a more grave note, the reason I'm here is to... Oddson had a sudden thought and cut the man off from finishing his sentence. Are you the man who left me that letter? He said curiously. Well, I was bringing the conversation around to that until I was abruptly interrupted, the man said, but he spoke in a humorous tone. Yes, I was the one that gave you my letter. For an instant I thought you wouldn't come, but I'm glad to see the curiosity gave you a fervent push in my direction. The man gave him a clever wink. The strange man liked to wink a lot, Oddson noticed. The man winked every time he said something that made his brain do a little twirl. So why did you want me to meet you here? He said. Well, I just wanted to give some of my words to you, but if my invitation is not appreciated, then Oddson butted in quickly. No, not at all, sir. I'm just curious, that's all. The man gave a reminiscent smile and said, Ah, to be young, and to drown in curiosity too immense to bear. He gave another chuckle. Oddson thought it was perfectly necessary to be curious, judging by the fact that the man invited him here, and obviously had something important to say, but didn't fulfill his curiosity right away. It was almost as if the man was lulling him into a false sense of security. He spoke very calm and soft, and his smile gave Oddson's heart a warm desire to know more about him. He was quite vague when he was answering his questions, but that made him think about his words a lot more than if he just shoved them in his brain boldly. He thought this man had some mystical qualities about him, just the way he stood and talked with so much power. After the long silence, the man said, "The reason I'm here is to take you to a good friend of mine," he said indignantly. "She has been talking about you for some time now and is quite anxious to meet you. Of course, if you will come with me." Oddson thought for a moment. Meet him? He didn't know anybody well besides his parents, and he didn't even know them that well. So how could this mysterious person this man spoke of want to meet him? He wasn't the least bit popular and didn't know anyone outside of the village. "Does she live in Hangleton?" Oddson asked shakily. "Not exactly. She lives right over the river on the other side of one of these mountains," the man said. "Well, I've never been over the mountains. How am I to meet her?" Oddson said curiously. He also asked the man another question that was nagging at his mind. "And how does this woman know of me? I know very little people outside the village." "And why would she want to see me?" Oddson finished, looking at the man to hear his answer. But it didn't come. The man just looked at him for a moment, drumming his finger rhythmically on his walking staff. Oddson looked into the man's bright blue eyes and saw them change a little darker blue, and his expression looked as if he was sad about something. He finally said, "Well, to answer the first question, I will be guiding you to her house, and you will be the traveler at my side, if you wish. Your second question is too difficult to explain now, and I grow woesome to think, if I didn't explain it in the right words, you might take it the wrong way." He finished, giving Oddson a grim look. "Well, sir, you can tell me, and I'll try to take it the right way," he said anxiously. "I am afraid that won't work, my child. You will soon see, in time." After these words, Oddson tore his eyes away from the man and stared at the bird that was now licking his feathers with an oddly black tongue. He couldn't stop thinking about the dream. This was a lot more important than he thought, but he couldn't help but trust the man. He seemed so noble, wise, and truthful. But who was this lady, and why did she want to talk to him so badly? He snapped out of his thoughtful daze and noticed the man was staring at him. He didn't dare look back, but he could feel the man's powerful stare that was penetrating through his mind and thoughts. The man finally broke the silence. "You don't have to come with me if you wish it," he said. Oddson thought about it for a time. He always fantasized leaving this boring village to go on adventures and see the other sceneries of the land. But that was only a fantasy. Now it was reality. It's a lot easier thinking of doing these things than being in a situation that pretty much forces you to do it. But Oddson was a brave boy, so he silently obliged. Good, good, the man said. I will be waiting in the same place tomorrow to take you to Dromelda. Dromelda is her name? How far past the mountains must we go to see her? Oddson said. Not far beyond the forest path. This answer will await you in the morning. It would be far more convenient if you came after sunrise, he said. Sure thing. The man bowed his head a little and beckoned to his bird. The brilliant blue bird flew from a nearby branch and perched on the man's shoulder. As the old man walked away, it was a spectacular sight, seeing the back of his hair flowing in the wind, his blue robe fluttering with the wind. The blue bird soon hovering above him as his miraculous staff bobbing up and down to his footsteps. He gazed at the man for a long while, his thoughts racing, but he blinked, and the man was gone.